So rather than having isolated pockets of things, have a connected community. So it could be the local shop with I love yoga, with a yoga centre, but make it accessible to people. So I could go somewhere that's really disabled friendly when you get there, but you can't get there because it's like St George's Walk is empty at the moment. That would be perfect for the MS community. I've got MS, and that would be perfect to have things there because it's easily to get to places. Because I mean, I've been here all my life, and I was born in Mayday, and I've actually watched it separate and like little bubbles of community, and really they need to bring it back together because there was that idea it was going to happen, but that idea's been cancelled, Renova or whatnot, because that's why it's all closed down. But now we've got an empty George Street, and I see that and I think, oh God, opportunity, and there's so much opportunity out there. We need to pick it up.
I know in certain towns they do have these multi-use places. Now, take some churches. They're only open on a Sunday, and possibly some are used as multi-use places during the week for, should we say, kids go to as somewhere to play sport or keep themselves occupied after school until the parents come home in the evening. So we're talking about 2 or 3 hours late afternoon. I see nothing wrong with that.
My name's Fred Wallace, and I am leading the campaign to save Burley Pawn Car Park. We've had a number of discussions with councillors over the past 3 years since 2007, and although the time when they've suggested they're going to knock the pool down and the car park has been extended, it is still a factor that the council in Croydon want to knock down the pool and car park in Purley and build a cinema and a library. Even though the cinemas in Croydon itself are almost always empty, and we have a very nice library still in Purley, so this just seems to be a waste of money, and it's an entire waste of money knocking down a very good facility which with a small amount of money should be able to be kept going.
Because all 5 boroughs meet at Crystal Palace, what I'd like to see is a central group that can control and bind together these 5 end pieces of the boroughs. For instance, outside my office there's 2 one-way signs which are a foot apart. One is obviously been put up by one borough and the other one's been put up by another borough, so it's a waste of money. My second point is footfall in the area. I see an awful lot of shops closing down. Some shops go to the wall because their business maybe is not up to it, but a lot of people struggle because of footfall. And when Sainsbury's was closed a little while ago, the shops across all along Westow Street really suffered. So Sainsbury's has brought in an enormous amount of footfall into the area, which is great. Unfortunately, it doesn't spread all the way around, so retail would be nice to get some retail in up at the top of Annerley Hill in order to spread out the footfall, and then people would start naturally meeting around the triangle. So there's a few points there. Also, I'd like diagonal parking if possible, which is in on the parade. It's a very wide road. It'd be good if we could get some parking there, so people could drive up. They wouldn't necessarily go to the Glades in Bromley or the Whitgift Centre in Croydon. They would come to Crystal Palace. So if we could get some retail, the big ones that hold up the high street, that'd be great.
And my concerns I've expressed to the officers today is about the realism of the core strategy. It's predicated on an assumption that growth trends that occurred throughout the 90s and 2000s will continue, and I'm not sure that it's accurately reflected the massive change in development economics. Quite simply, the world is very different to what it was even in 2000, let alone before that. And to that end, the assumptions about housing and retailing are probably, I would suggest, wrong. And if the emphasis is on providing family housing, I think there is a need for a different strategy. I've suggested to the officers, therefore, that if the strategy stays broadly as currently drafted, there should at least be a plan B that reflects the realities of the recession, and probably when we're in for 5 to 7 years of public expenditure cuts. and that therefore there needs to be a plan B about a harsher economic environment. Well, yeah, I don't think in the next 10 years you will get anywhere near the quantity of development in Croydon town centre that the strategy envisages, for all sorts of reasons related to the way funding institutions work, developers work. Therefore, if one wants more family housing, I think that's probably a common theme by all parties. It has to be achieved somewhere beyond the town centre. Well, practical terms, I think now, is that if you look at your own 5-year housing supply figures that's published on the website, a big number of them have been identified in red, which means they're not going forward. I've suggested in my response that in fact that's a conservative estimate, and in fact the vast majority of those sites will not go forward. Developers, and I work for national, sub-regional developers, at the moment are not buying land. So quite simply, the trends that have happened in the past will not continue. So there will be a problem, and that problem of family housing is probably quite acute. I think that it's not quite right that people aren't buying anywhere, because one of the ironies of this recession is that we've still had property price inflation, and the reason we're having that property price inflation is because of the lack of supply. But the thing that is being built still, going just beyond Croydon, is houses with gardens. People want houses with gardens. They don't want to live in flats. The evidence of places like Leeds and Nottingham, where massive investment was put into lots of flats, even 3-bed flats. 3-bed flats don't attract families. They invariably, in places like Leeds, attract sharing students. Nothing wrong with sharing students. My son's one, but it's a myth to believe that building big 3-bed flats in town centres will bring in families. There are lots of things the planning framework can do to encourage people to certainly have less cars, but one of the advantages Croydon's got, if you look at is that there are parts of the borough that are very well served by things like the tram, but you've got to build the houses close to where the trams are. I think that the key thing for families is houses with gardens. I worked on a major regeneration scheme just on your borders 10 years ago on Ramshore, and everything that came out of that was that the tenants on Ramshore didn't want to live in slab blocks, even though they were nice 3-bed, generous 3-bed flats. They wanted houses with gardens like everyone else in the suburbs got, and whether we like it or not, the country is largely anti-urbanist.
What I'd like to see is a thermal image taken on every single residence in the whole borough, where it's a flat, where it's an individual dwelling, and to see where this heat is leaking, and try and give some encouragement through the energy companies to give grants so that this payback problem is not a problem which prevents people from, shall we say, loft insulation, cavity wall insulation, buying new boilers and all the rest of it. It's because of that payback people are stopping from actually buying stuff which would actually cut down energy use.
Hello, I'm Georgia Wrighton. I represent the Women's Design Group in Croydon. The key issues are making sure that women feel safe on the streets and in the public spaces in Croydon. Also affordable housing, because women earn less than men and tend to be the majority of single parents. Affordable social rented housing is really key. Access to public toilets in new developments and in shopping areas. I suppose designing new neighbourhoods with safety in mind, so that there's plenty of surveillance, so that you don't feel that if you were attacked then no one would hear you scream. Making you feel as if there are people around, places that encourage lots of different people, busy streets, particularly at night, making sure that there are people around at night, around bus stops, around transport nodes. I think we'd like to see more dispersed of those sort of activities, more mixed use dispersed around the local areas and not just focused on East Croydon and the main centres, definitely. I think that's a principle across the board for the core strategy we'd like to see.